Hey there, friends. Welcome to another delicious serving of the Binge. I'm your host, and I'll be dishing up a hearty helping of thought-provoking discussions and insightful perspectives. Here on the Binge, we like to explore all sorts of fascinating topics and subjects, from the quirky to the profound, the lighthearted to the controversial. Each episode, I'll invite you to join me in indulging your curiosity as we dive into a new smorgasbord of ideas. Maybe one week we'll be savoring a nuanced look at the latest cultural phenomenon. The next, we'll be sampling a zesty debate about an important social issue. From delectable dissections of internet trends to a hearty helping of fresh outlooks, I aim to serve up a balanced menu that engages and nourishes the mind. So grab a snack, pull up a chair, and prepare to feast alongside me in a judgment-free zone. On the Binge, there's always room for respectful discourse and friendly discussion, no matter how spicy the subject matter may be. I'll provide the main course of topics, but I wholeheartedly welcome you to bring your own thoughts, opinions, and perspectives to the table. After all, this banquet of ideas is best enjoyed when we come together and savor it as a community. So let's indulge our intellectual appetites and dig into the flavorful spread of conversations to come. This episode's sponsored by Spiral Floors.
It's the Binge Podcast where everything's a blast. It's the Binge Podcast. Come join us fast.
Ben Franklin, the founding father of wacky brilliance. Benjamin Franklin was many things: a printer, writer, scientist, inventor, statesman, and of course, our nation's most eccentric and kite-obsessed founding father. Born in 1706 to a modest family of candle makers in Boston, young Benny showed an early penchant for unconventional thinking and bizarre hobbies. As a child, he invented the first known swim fins by strapping wooden planks to his hands and feet. He also pioneered extreme snacking by habitually walking through town munching on entire wheels of cheese. Franklin's quirky brilliance truly began to blossom during his teenage years as a printer's apprentice. Unsatisfied with the bland publications of the day, he wrote and published a series of hilarious farting essays under the pseudonym Farticus Maximus. Literary critics were outraged, but the working class lapped it up, making Franklin an early champion of juvenile humor and bodily function jokes. His scientific pursuits were no less eccentric. Franklin is credited with mapping the Gulf Stream current by tossing dozens of casks of stale bread into the Atlantic and meticulously tracking their path. He also conducted pioneering research into electricity by flying a kite in a thunderstorm while wearing a metal swimsuit and rubber boots, an experiment that would get any modern scientist immediately fired or institutionalized. But Franklin's crowning achievement in wacky brilliance was undoubtedly his invention of the Franklin stove in 1742. Designed to provide more efficient heating, this cast iron furnace looked like a cross between a bathroom fixture and a medieval torture device. It also had the delightful side effect of belching acrid smoke into the room if not properly vented. The Franklin stove was an instant hit among the nation's most masochistic homeowners. During the American Revolution, Franklin put his quirky talents to use as a diplomat in France. He charmed the French by showing up to royal events wearing a ratty fur cap and holding a chunk of air from the cask he used to cross the Atlantic. The French, masters of sophistication, were utterly baffled by this bizarre American and his rustic headgear. In his later years, Franklin became a true Renaissance weirdo. He proposed innovative concepts like paying people to be aired instead of jailed and convincing the British to repopulate America with convicted criminals. He joined quirky clubs with names like the Fart Catching Club and the Leather Apron Club, exactly what it sounds like. And of course, he spent an inordinate amount of time naked, giving rise to the famous quote, "A penny saved is a penny to be pantsless." Benjamin Franklin lived to the ripe old age of 84, which was frankly shocking given his penchant for being struck by lightning, ingesting noxious fumes, and prancing about in the nude. He left behind a lasting legacy as a brilliant statesman, pioneering scientist, and America's first true eccentric genius. Modern scientists still can't decide if he was a mad genius or just plain mad. But one thing is certain, old Ben was always good for a laugh and a shock, both literally and figuratively. Why cats are infinitely superior to dogs. A furry manifesto. Let's start by addressing the elephant in the room. Dogs are objectively terrible companions. They're needy, obnoxious, and dumb as a sack of rocks. Cats, on the other hand, are the undisputed royalty of the pet world. Here's why these furry monarchs unequivocally rule over their drooling canine subjects. First off, cats are hygienic masters who spend half their lives licking themselves spotless. Dogs? They'll joyfully roll around in festering piles of goose droppings and then immediately try to lick your face. Thanks, but no thanks. I'd rather not contract the bubonic plague from my supposed best friend. Cats also have self-respect and won't debase themselves by performing demeaning tricks for table scraps. You could dangle an entire roast chicken in front of them and they wouldn't so much as bat an eye. Dogs, meanwhile, will degrade themselves by shaking paws, rolling over, and catching drool-encrusted tennis balls in their mouths, all for a measly milk bone. Have some dignity, you flea-ridden court jesters. Another key advantage of cats is that they're brilliant, yet low-maintenance companions. They'll bestow you with their presence and the occasional blink of acknowledgement, but won't incessantly beg for your attention like dogs. Cats are the independent introverts of the pet world, happy to coexist peacefully without making constant needy demands. Dogs, on the other hand, are the pet equivalent of that overbearing friend who never stops texting you. Pay attention to me. Let's go for a walk. Scratch my belly. Keep me entertained at all times. No thanks, Fido. Mommy and Daddy have a headache. Let's also discuss the practical advantage of owning a cat. They're perfectly content using a litter box inside, sparing you from having to wake up at 6 a.m. to let them out to pee in a damp, freezing backyard. Cats are also much cheaper since they don't require a fancy obedience classes, annual licenses, or regular doggy daycare. Just scoop the litter box, refill the food dish, and voila, you're an exemplary cat owner. Finally, cats are the vastly more eco-friendly pet choice. They don't bark incessantly, disturbing the neighbors and causing a ruckus. They don't require acres of land and a white picket fence to roam. And most importantly, they don't produce the massive, earth-scorching fart clouds that dogs unleash with reckless abandon. Every time a dog passes gas, an ozone layer weeps. So in summary, cats are the superior pet in every conceivable way. They're cleaner, smarter, more self-sufficient, and less obnoxious than their droopy-jowled canine counterparts. Dogs may be labeled man's best friend, but cats are clearly the more refined and evolved companions. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some litter box scooping to attend to, the height of pet ownership bliss. The global travel bug. Admittedly, the notion of traveling the world is a rather broad, nay, let's be honest, a massively vague and essentially meaningless concept. What exactly does it mean to travel the world? Is it about hitting up every single nation state on the map, like collecting caps for a beverage bottle? Is it about immersing yourself in each distinct culture, mastering the folk ways and tongues until you can pass as a native-born child of that landmass? Is it more of a Phileas Fogg type gig where you just hopscotch around different continents and cities, checking the boxes as quickly as possible? There are manifold ways to interpret the idea, each with its own respective merits and pitfalls. But let's be real. For most of us, the driving force behind any sort of global trek is the insuperable American lust for newness, for novel sensory inputs, for a temporary escape from the existential ennui of our homebound routines. We crave the frisson of the unfamiliar, the subtle voltage that comes from being a fish out of water. We want to be regressed, however briefly, to a state of childlike wonder, where the most mundane sights and sounds have the lustered sheen of novelty. It's a sort of psychological caprice, this desire to slough off our jadedness through sheer changes in topography and culture. But of course, the truth is that no matter how far afield we roam, we're never all that far from ourselves. Our particular cognitive conscriptions, our ingrained lenses of perception, the synaptic templates that determine how we process and integrate every experience, these are inescapable. They are the atmospheric constraints through which new landscape is inevitably filtered, no matter where we go, where we are. And this, I'd humbly suggest, is the central paradox, and perhaps even the central tragedy of world travel. We seek to slough off our habits and biases, but they remain stubbornly affixed. We crave the frisson of dislocation, but we're trapped in the familiarity of our own subjectivity. The world is radically new, but we cannot be radically new ourselves. We are, in the end, beholden to the tyranny of our own consciousness. Not that this self-implicating reality should dissuade us from buying that plane ticket and hitting the road. I mean, there's something to be said for sheer spectacle of novel vistas, for the simple delights of tasting new cuisines and absorbing new aesthetics, but we'd be wise to retain a certain humility about the whole endeavor. We'd be prudent to acknowledge that, for all our wayfaring, we remain tethered to the perspectival singularity that is our own mind. We are, in the end, both rooted and rootless, both embedded and estranged, both cosmopolitan citizens and forever aliens. Such is the human condition when undertaking that supposedly fun thing of trying to travel the world. Please consider subscribing.
Tune in right now. Got stories to tell, from the small to the grand, all under one spell. We talk about this, we laugh about that, from the strange to the bliss. Get ready to chat. It's the Binge Podcast, where everything's a blast. It's the Binge Podcast, come join us fast. Right now, got stories to tell, from the small to the grand, all under one spell. We talk about this, we laugh about that, from the strange to the bliss. Get ready to chat. It's the Binge Podcast, where everything's a blast. It's the Binge Podcast, come join us fast. Where everything's a blast. It's the Binge Podcast, come join us fast. Tune in right now. Stories to tell, from the small to the grand, all under one spell. We talk about this, we laugh about that, from the strange to the bliss. Get ready to chat. It's the Binge Podcast, where everything's a blast. It's the Binge Podcast, come join us fast.